Remember a few years ago it came out that the Scottish Government was funding a performer called Ailey McCaskill who did an act as Gendersaurus, and there was some controversy about it in the media.
I am exploring how the patriarchy and heteronormativity is basically destroying children's lives.
You can see here a photograph from a course for children run by Ailey McCaskill and someone else where they can explore gender and all this sort of thing. I don't know about you, that doesn't look entirely healthy to me. Ailey McCaskill has now decided that she is a man and she's called Ivor McCaskill. Here's a clip from her latest show. So various other activities. Ailey's been funded by the Scottish Government and by the EU. But we can see in her promotional picture here, we've got the dinosaur on top of a pile of books. Right, looking at that pile of books there. Harmful to Minors. Let's have a look at that book. Harmful to Minors. Oh, it's quite small, the text there. Let's just look at the subtitle a bit more closely. The Perils of Protecting Children from Sex. So this person is pushing quite a long way down the road towards paedophilia, and he has been funded with your taxes. So what sort of people does the Scottish Government turn to when they want advice about sex education? What sort of people do they trust to set the tone for this vital area of education in Scotland? Well, we saw one of them, the Gendersaurus business there. I've already made a video about Nicky Coyer in the band with the satanic or at least anti-Christian imagery. He's at the heart of planning sex education in Scotland. We've looked at Tomska, the YouTuber that they selected, who's got a really degenerate, frankly sick view of sex that comes through in his other videos. And my personal experience teaching, the one person I came across in teaching who was most keen on pushing this sort of vulgar, immoral style of sex education was someone who, as it turned out, was having, shall we say, inappropriate relationships with pupils. Let's see who else the Scottish Government listens to when it comes to sex education. Let's go back about 10 years. Who we've got here? James Rennie, Chief Executive of LGBT Youth Scotland, key advisor on sex education to the Scottish Executive. Key advisor on sex education. Until that is, he was arrested for sexually abusing extremely young children and running a huge paedophile network from his computer at LGBT Youth Scotland. Now, just while we're on LGBT Youth Scotland, just saw this the other day. A man who thought he was sending naked pictures of himself to what he thought was a 12-year-old boy who was going to meet him for sex. It was prosecuted for it. This man had previously been a youth worker at LGBT Youth Scotland. Right, moving on to the Tie campaign. Now, in the Scottish Parliament, the leaders of the Tie campaign are fated. This is the group that are called for the LGBT inclusive education. In other words, LGBT content in every subject and every aspect of school life at every stage from nursery all the way through. So let's have a listen to one of the Tie campaign founders, Jordan Daly.
We initially called for LGBT education to be statutory in every single school because we knew, as all you will know, that the faith schools in Scotland were going to be an absolutely huge hurdle. We'd watched what had happened before. I personally had seen the work that Stonewall and LGBT Youth doing, and I knew that as much as they were doing good work, no one was really getting anywhere because of the influence that the faith schools and the Catholic education has within Scottish Parliament. Everyone's quite scared to rock the boat, so we came in and decided to sink it.
So that's Jordan speaking at the Scottish Secular Society, explaining that basically religion is the problem, in particular Catholicism and Catholic schools. They are his enemy, that he's going to have to basically destroy them in order to achieve his ends. Then John Swinney puts into practice everything Jordan Daly demands, and then John Swinney stands up in the Scottish Parliament and says, if you're a Catholic or of some other religious persuasion, and you think that the LGBT inclusive education in some way contradicts your faith, John Swinney says, you're wrong. It actually doesn't.
I I'm aware that some may say that LGBTI inclusive education could undermine the values of their faiths or beliefs. I do not take this view.
Anyway, carrying on with Jordan Daly, here's just something from his Twitter feed. Recently he retweeted an image showing someone tearing up a picture of the Pope. So again, an anti-Christian, anti-Catholic viewpoint coming through, but that viewpoint goes straight to the heart of government, and they do everything he wants. And the people who say, whoa, this isn't what we want, John Swinney says, not interested. You're just mixed up. It is what you really want. So while we're on the Thai campaign, let's look at someone else involved with that. This is John Naples Campbell. He's also an advisor to the General Teaching Council for Scotland on LGBT matters. I just had a quick look at his Twitter feed, and he's saying he's delighted there's a new show about drag on the BBC. Now, when I'm talking about drag, that's not like dressing up as a woman for comedy effect. This is more akin to transvestitism, which is dressing up as someone of the opposite sex for the purpose of sexual gratification. Now, drag might not be that entirely, but it's still there to fulfill a desire in the person to pretend to be of the opposite sex. It's not just for the entertainment of viewers. And the representations of women that these men try to recreate, they're always extremely sexualized. Now, I think there's something distorted about wanting to warp your identity like that, and also for other people to want to watch it. I don't think this is a good thing for young people. I think it could lead people down to the path of transgenderism, or it could normalize that sort of path. And even if people don't go down that road completely, I still think it's not healthy. But General Teaching Council for Scotland's Thai campaign think this is just the man. General Teaching Council for Scotland are mulling over whether or not to strike me off, because I think that kids ideally need a mum and a dad, whereas this man's got just the values they're looking for, so he's right into the heart of the organisation, advising them on sex education matters. But let's go back a long way to people who've tried to influence sex education in Scotland. Let's go back to Ian Campbell Dunn. He held the first International Gay Rights Conference in Edinburgh in 1974. He's involved in various organisations, and they campaigned very vigorously to scrap Section 28. Section 28 was the law which prevented the promotion of homosexuality in schools, and ultimately they were successful. Now, Ian Campbell Dunn, he was so well known among the LGBT community that an award was named after him, the Ian Dunn Award, and that was actually presented to Patrick Harvey, the Green MSP, in 2007. Actually, Ian Campbell Dunn, though, was the co-founder of the UK Paedophile Information Exchange. Now, I could go into more details about his personal sex life, but I won't inflict that on you, but you can imagine. Now, when Ian Dunn died in 1998, lots of other LGBT activists gave glowing tributes to him. In fact, Peter Tatchell, you're probably familiar with him, gay rights activist, very well known. He wrote a glowing tribute to him in the Independent newspaper. Now, Peter Tatchell, what's he got to say about things? In 1997, Peter Tatchell wrote a letter to the Guardian newspaper that was published, and it says this: "The positive nature of some child-adult sexual relationships is not confined to non-Western cultures. Several of my friends, gay and straight, male and female, had sex with adults from the ages of 9 to 13. None feel they were abused. All say it was their conscious choice and gave them great joy. While it may be impossible to condone paedophilia, it is time society acknowledged the truth that not all sex involving children is unwanted, abusive, and harmful." That's Peter Tatchell's view. Now, I heard from someone once who was on a TV programme with Peter Tatchell, and the BBC said to this other person, before the show, they said, "You must not raise Peter Tatchell's 1997 letter to the Guardian, or we'll just cut the show. You cannot mention that." So the BBC were happy to protect him on that front. Now, not too long ago, Peter Tatchell was in Scotland. He was in Edinburgh, in fact, and he gave a talk about time for a radical rethink of sex education. Now, I almost did a debate with Peter Tatchell in the Edinburgh International Science Festival a few years ago, and he was going to argue that porn is beneficial, And I was going to argue it most certainly is not. Peter actually pulled out for personal reasons, but the event went ahead and I debated against a porn actress. Well, let's see what he recommends for sex education in Scotland. First of all, at the end of this talk, he says, basically, this is a message to John Swinney. I hope you put this into practice. And good news for Peter Tatchell, John Swinney basically has put Peter Tatchell's advice into practice. Let's see what he said. Right, a new ethical framework, mutual consent, respect and fulfilment. The great advantage of these principles is that they apply universally, regardless of whether people are married or single, monogamous or promiscuous, or hetero, bi or homo. So we want an ethical framework that endorses promiscuity. Right, well, at least he's open about that, and he's got exactly what he wants from the Scottish Government. Give kids all the facts. Sex education ought to tell the whole truth about every kind of sexual relationship, including sexual practices some people find distasteful, such as anal intercourse and sadomasochism. Peter, your wish is John Swinney's command. This is exactly the way the curriculum in Scotland has been structured, to include all sorts of, well, frankly, immoral, disgusting, degrading acts. How to have good sex. Again, that's the major thrust of it. There's no moral considerations. There's no longer term ethical and relationship implications, just about having good sex in the present. So the course should include things like the multitude of erogenous zones and how to excite them, and methods to achieve good orgasms for oneself and one's partner. Well, Peter Tatchell, I just wish I had John Swinney's ear the way you do. When you suggest things, he just does them. When I challenge him about things, he just doesn't tell the truth. Anyway, what else have we got? Respect for sexual diversity. Teachers have a duty to validate the diversity of adult sex and relationships that fall within the ethical framework of mutual consent, respect and fulfillment. So any sort of adult sexual practice or form of relationship that involves whatever number of people of whatever sex doing absolutely anything, it is the teacher's duty to validate it. And yeah, that's exactly the way the Scottish curriculum works. It just presents any and every sexual practice, and there's no judgment. They're all presented as equally valid, and the pupils can just choose from this buffet as they wish, according to their own taste. We don't let parents take their kids out of maths or history, so why should a parental opt-out be permitted for sex and relationships education? Well, I can give several reasons for that. Anyway, at the very least, parents who want to withdraw their children should be required to come to each lesson and physically remove their child. I mean, how idiotic is that? The situation in Scotland, certainly in Falkirk Council, I've seen the documentation for it, and I would imagine it's uniform through Scotland, is if a parent wants to withdraw children from the sex education, then they can do that. But if the child is 12 or over, the child can overrule the parents and go to it in any case, which is completely outrageous. But of course, there's also the LGBT inclusive education element, which is in every subject, and that has deliberately been structured so that it is impossible to withdraw from it. So just to conclude, I'm not saying they're all a bunch of paedophiles. What I'm saying is the Scottish Government has not been open about the values and ideologies that are influencing and driving sex education in Scotland. The government needs to be discerning. They need to look at who they're listening to and to recognise what their agenda is. But they don't do that. In fact, they're not capable of doing that. They just say if something's got a rainbow on it, then they must be the goodies, and you do exactly what they say and accept it 100%. Look at Peter Tatchell. As far as mainstream society, mainstream media, political establishment in Britain is concerned, he is a human rights campaigner. He is actually an apologist for paedophilia. So we need MSPs in the Scottish Parliament with discernment, and that's where the Scottish Family Party comes in. We want to put people like that into the Parliament. Now, we've got lots of videos about the new RSHP sex education resources produced by the government. You can look on our YouTube channel. There's 15 or 20 of them now, so you can investigate a lot more deeply. You can come along to our Scottish Family Party conference. Our first ever conference is on the 16th of November in Edinburgh. It's open to non-members. There's a link below. And a great first step in supporting us is to join the Scottish Family Party. Costs about a cup of coffee per month. Again, there's a link below. Thanks for watching.